been any exchange of messages between the U.S. and Iran in the wake of this weekend?
Amidst all sorts of speculations that have been going around on social networks in the aftermath of the Islamic Republic of Iran's April 13 military attacks on Israel, regarding US-Iran messages or conversations over the escalation of conflict in the Middle East, the United States has eventually set the record straight on the issue. The United States, which was kind of reacting to rumors like this one which started spreading on X on the Tuesday of April 16, claiming that Washington had contacted Tehran, asking it to allow Israel to launch a symbolic retaliatory strike, to save face, amidst calls for de-escalation of tension between Iran and Israel, has denied such a conversation having been held between the two states. Through the Department of State spokesperson Matthew Miller, the United States said that 3 days after those attacks by Iran, officials in Washington had not held any of the conversations that people on social networks were talking about. Matthew Miller even went ahead to say that going by the recent developments in the Middle East, the United States, as a host of the United Nations, will be forced to impose some movement restrictions on Iranian officials and diplomats attending various United Nations meetings going into the future. That, such officials could be the Iranian ambassador to the United Nations and his delegation, as well as the Iranian foreign minister, who is expected to attend a crucial United Nations meeting in New York in the coming days. And that, such restrictions could include excluding him from going anywhere beyond a 5-block radius of the United Nations headquarters, his hotel, or airport, and without saying much, take a listen at Matthew Miller make the clarification here.
Has there been any exchange of messages between the U.S. and Iran in the wake of this weekend's?
There has not been, and I've seen some false reporting about messages exchanged between the United States and Iran, reports claiming that we have delivered messages to them. There have not been such messages delivered. It's been days since we've communicated, since we've sent messages to the government of Iran, and I say that as a reminder of something we've said before. Oftentimes the Iranian government has misled the world about either messages they've passed to us or messages that we have passed to them, and some of those reports over the past few days have been false.
And do you have any plans to engage with the Iranian foreign minister when he's in New York?
I do not anticipate any such engagements.
Can you confirm the U.S. has granted him a visa for his visit to the UN?
So a few things about that. Number one, visa records are confidential as a matter of law. They're not something I can speak to from this podium. Number two, we do take our obligation as the host nation of the United Nations quite seriously, and that includes allowing diplomats from other countries, even countries with whom we have significant disagreements, to attend UN meetings and UN functions. But number three, we do have the ability to restrict, and in fact severely restrict, the movements of certain diplomats while they are in New York for legitimate UN meetings. So should the foreign minister of Iran attend this meeting at the United Nations, I would not expect to see him at very many locations outside the United Nations.
But there were already restrictions, so this is a further restriction.
Again, I'm not going to speak to that in detail, other than to say we do have the ability to impose very severe restrictions on the movements of certain diplomats, and I would not expect to see him very many places outside the United Nations.
Because one of the first things you guys did, like in February, just after you came into office, was to remove the restrictions that were put on Iranian diplomats in New York. So have you restored those?
So as I stand here today,
and those restrictions, if I'm correct, and I think I am, it precluded them from going anywhere outside of the UN building, the Iranian mission, and like a 5-block radius of the east side.
So as I stand here today, a day before this scheduled meeting, when he is not here, the Iranian foreign minister is not here in New York, I'm not able to speak to that question or answer it in detail. But I will just say, should he attend, you can expect very severe restrictions on his movements inside New York.
The Office of Foreign Missions puts out, it did when the Trump administration did this, it was public. It came out.
So I would just say,
and then you guys rescinded them very deliberately.
And I would say stay tuned, but I would not expect to see him, for example, snapping selfies on top of the Empire State Building should he travel to New York to attend this meeting.
Well, how about snapping selfies on the East River at the UN building?
Obviously, that goes back to the thing I said at the beginning, which is we do take our obligation as the host of the United Nations seriously. But we have the ability to impose restrictions for people to travel outside of attending United Nations meetings and, say, hotels and airports and such things, the ability to travel to and from United Nations meetings.
Israel.